not an ace pilot. I had spent weeks trying to get these pieces of paper, and every waking hour since I'd received them, vetting each document for factual errors or red flags. I worked to compare the new memos with the official documents I'd received since 1999, and they meshed in ways large and small. Furthermore, the content, the essential truth of the story contained in the memos, had been corroborated by Killian's commander, General Bobby Hodges, in a phone conversation 2 days before the story aired. On September 6th, he had said the memos reflected Killian's feelings at the time, and that this was what he remembered about how Killian had handled Bush's departure from the Guard. We had a senior document analyst named Marcel Matley fly to New York to look at all the documents we had, the official documents that had been previously released by the White House, as well as the new ones. After examining them for hours, blowing up signatures and comparing curves, strokes, and dots, he gave his best opinion on their authenticity. Since the documents were copies, not originals, he could not offer the 100% assurance that came by testing the ink or the paper. But he said he saw nothing in the typeface or format to indicate the memos had been doctored or not produced at the time they were alleged to have been. The analyst also vouched for the Killian signatures after comparing them with more than a dozen other Killian signatures that we had on photocopied official documents. A second analyst, Jim Pierce, agreed after examining 2 of the Killian documents and comparing them to the official records and signatures. I felt that I was in the clear, that I'd done my job, and that the story met the high standards demanded by 60 Minutes. I called my husband and son to say good morning, just as I'd done every morning in all the years past when I was out of town. As always, my husband told me my work had looked great, and my 7-year-old boy told me to come home as fast as I could and to bring him a surprise. It was a regular ritual. I was staying at my favorite home away from home, the Pierre, a grand old New York hotel that's stuffy and high-priced. Without my CBS discount, I never would have seen the inside of the place. When I got to work that morning, I made rounds to thank the editors who'd worked so hard to get the story put together in time for air. There were jokes about what we would do as a follow-up. Dan and I had broken the Abu Ghraib story in late April. Now this. My team, the people at 60 Minutes, and Dan all felt like we were on a roll. The new executive producer of 60 Minutes Wednesday, Josh Howard, gave me a hug and congratulations, following up on a flattering email he'd sent me around midnight the night before. I was just sitting here thinking about how amazing you are. I'm buckled in, ready to see where you'll take us next. Let's go. There was no hint of what was to come, no whiff of doubt about the work we'd all done on the story. I saw CBS Vice President Betsy West standing in the CBS building's 8th floor lobby, waiting for the slow, unreliable elevators, and we laughed at how awful the previous night had been, how hurried and harried we'd all been trying to get the story on. We both felt good about the story and agreed it had looked polished on the air, a stark contrast to the carnage left behind in the editing rooms and the office where we'd done our scripting. There was nothing more important to me or to any of us at 60 Minutes than getting the story right, no matter how limited the time or how tough the topic. I had a well-earned reputation for being able to crash, to get a story on quickly and competently. For whatever reason, probably because I grew up in a large, loud, distracting family, I was able to focus when others couldn't. I could keep writing when the room was full of people yelling at the top of their lungs. I was able to think clearly when the clock seemed to be ticking too fast. Everything changed at about 11 a.m. when I first started hearing rumbles from some producers at CBS News that a handful of far-right websites were saying that the documents had been forged. I was incredulous. That couldn't be possible. Even on the morning the story aired, when we showed the president's people the memos, the White House hadn't attempted to deny the truth of the documents. In fact, the president's spokesman, Dan Bartlett, had claimed that the documents supported their version of events, that then Lieutenant Bush had asked for permission to leave the unit. Within a few minutes, I was online visiting websites I'd never heard of before: Free Republic, Little Green Footballs, Powerline. They were hardcore, politically angry, hyper-conservative sites loaded with vitriol about Dan Rather and CBS. Our work was being compared to that of Jason Blair, the discredited New York Times reporter who had fabricated and plagiarized stories. All these websites had extensive write-ups.